don't see any. Oneness Talk Radio.
Hey, how are you doing today, Thomas?
Good. This is Thomas Ardavany and Suzanne Toro here with you on Oneness Talk Radio. So where else can we hear this beautiful show other than on Oneness?
We can hear it on Amazon Music, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We can also hear it on Blog Talk Radio. SolVibes&Indie Creators.
Wow, look at that. We have a super, really challenging show for you today. I mean, this is like, the subject matter is pretty deep. I think it's the beginning of the most beautiful thing that a human can really begin to embark on. So, I'm totally challenged with this conversation because you have to be it in order to say it. So it's like, if you're not being it, then there's no way a proper explanation is going to come out of you. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's challenging, right?
Well, it feels, we just went over actually the full moon, because it'll be, and it feels like we've been in a holding spot. So I think it's a great time to have this conversation. But I hear you, when we're not exactly in the place that we're speaking about, that can be challenging for sure. But I think it's really powerful too. The last conversation we had was pretty juicy. So this will be an exciting one.
It's a total build, because without those other steps being put into place, it's going to be really hard for you guys to even begin to understand what the hell we're talking about. So we'll try to set everything up as we get into this concept of self-realization.
And just to maybe remind you all where we left off was that we were really engaging with our gatekeeper and moving on to the other side of the gate with our gatekeeper, and in this place of vibrational potentiality that is really juicy and has a lot of power and potential without obstructions and obstacles, and so that's really exciting.
Wow, could you say that again 5 times?
It's juicy.
Juicy.
And without any obstacles and full of potential and possibilities. That's not exactly what I said, but recapitulation. So,
what is this recapitulation word?
I don't know. It just came out.
It just sounded fancy. Something to say.
My tongue is tied. So we're on the other side of the gate, and our gatekeeper is awake, and we're engaged. We're in a place in alignment with our inner and outer world, that our efforts are actually building and helping to some accumulation towards a level of mastery. And in this state of being, you can not only...
Oh, a helicopter.
Yeah, incoming.
Who goes there? A helicopter, incoming.
Incoming. Well, and that's a perfect example. You have a helicopter incoming, you can retain your state of being, and that service word came up even out of your mouth at the end of last segment.
Well, what came out of my mouth? I can never remember what comes out of my mouth. It's a bit of a dangerous... bit of a dangerous
Thomas
thing.
is in such a moment-to-moment existence.
Yeah.
Everything's like moment, gone, moment.
Moment gone.
But here we're building, and so when you're building towards mastery, then you are aligned with your innate gifts, your full potential. You're building towards that, and you're really focused on that. So you're not really getting sucked down on the other side of the gate into Dante's Inferno. And you're being of service, and it's quite effortless. It's not like a chore. That's one thing you mentioned. It's not something you have to be like, oh, I'm going to go serve the Boy Scouts today, or I'm going to go serve food on Park Avenue. You're already aligned with what that means and how to do it quite effortlessly. So it's very exciting, but the essence and the effort of being there does take responsibility, and as you mentioned, even that we will be ejected or roll back down the mountain. But at this point, really, when you're on this side of the gate, the stakes are higher, but you are in a flow so that you can stay on that side of the gate or remember quickly. So, how are you doing over there? You're waiting for me to keep going. So,
you don't need to run on. I was just wanting to see how far. I was just going to.
I'll just keep going. I'll go for the whole hour. If
I don't know.
Like.
You're kind of got a little stuck there.
No.
Do you know what you're talking about?
I do know what I'm talking about.
Good. Just checking. Make sure you know what you're talking about.
Well, and the one thing, I think also in the past segments we've been talking about more as we were going into karmic action and those things, and getting engaged with your gatekeeper, is that sometimes the propensity is to look at negative action, but the really powerful thing that I've found when I've been able to reside on that side of the gate is that there's a really alchemical thing that's happening and might be described metaphysically, not something you can always put into words, but the power to really enhance things and juice them up, you amplify them like a super boost to your efforts, which is, I don't know, I'm always like a little kid when those things happen. I'm like, wow, because it's really magical, for lack of better words or syntax. And then without attachment to those experiences, realizing like, wow, if I keep my efforts here, those things can keep building.
So you're talking about the gatekeeper right now.
Being on the other side of the gate with your gatekeeper actively engaged, and being at a place where we're leading into is self-realization. I guess I've been like talking in the long run sentence about what the potential is in this space with your own realizations, with your mastery, and your ability to serve.
Yes, all of that. Self-realization is an action, and we know that. We know it's an action that a person that's crossed over can take, or in order to remain crossed over, self-realization becomes the muscle that is being developed in order to step into this realm commonly referred to as metaphysics. It's important to understand the previous steps, the mastery of being present. Self-realization doesn't become a possibility unless that mastery is appreciated, and then the ability to observe oneself, take photographs of oneself, possibly for years, or maybe if you're evolved enough, then you're ready to go. You've taken enough photographs of yourself, but you need to do that first. Second, I mean, and then you have the education of the gatekeeper. In other words, your discernment of the impressions that you allow to enter yourself and how you perceive those impressions. So as you collect objective information on yourself, the gatekeeper becomes more educated and then has the ability to discern what's good for it and you. And as that gatekeeper strengthens, choices become better. And then once that foundation has been laid, and I've heard of people achieving it in 3 years, let's say, being able to lay that foundation. That's bringing with them that perception every day and every night, and doing their work in the morning and the evening, and trying to create this crossover into a 24-hour cycle. And once people can start to really appreciate what it is to be present in a 24, 48, 72-hour cycle, now the self-realization muscle starts to take root, because you don't want to go back. Now you want to be productive while you're in an elevated state of being. You want to be productive in it. And you want to maintain it in a way in which you're in perpetual action. And what's nice about that is that the learning curve about you being a human on this planet in this moment in time becomes also perpetual. And that's fun, that's crazy. That's like now stepping into the ethers and touching on your potential. The exercise of self-realization begins with a concept that the Sufis referred to, which is, the esoteric Muslim chapter in metaphysics falls into the Sufis' mystical practice and teachings. And so this concept of divided attention is born out of that particular teaching. All of the great teachings of the world have it in there, metaphorically speaking. But this is like a relatively new thing that came into the 20th century to sort of label the the higher states of consciousness that man can enter into and live in order to realize their potential. And that begins with the understanding of divided attention. Now, if the mastery, if the understanding how to be present and you've observed enough and the gatekeeper's educated enough, this concept of divided attention has already been in vogue. You've already been using it in order to become present. It just hasn't been a conscientious understanding of dividing one's attention in order to be active within the space. That's absolutely critical. So what's interesting is that when we evolve, we have mastery over our attention to a certain degree. So I can put part of my attention this way, and I can put the other part of my attention back towards me at the same time. And in doing that, you do something really kind of fun, is that you plug up the portal of the intellect, the formatory apparatus, the reasoning mechanism, and then you enter into this wisdom world. And the mind doesn't like it because at that point it's got to let go of control, because now we've entered into another realm, which is the realm of mastery of oneself. We've touched on it. So as we divide attention, we learn to exist in this space. And when we exist in this space, it becomes a very astute appreciation of the moment at hand. It's not just the moment or being present anymore. Now you're actively in the moment, picking up the nuances of the world that you live in and strengthening your sensory perception and healing along the way. Physiologically, when you enter into the realm of self-realization, there's a natural healing that begins to occur within the body and the mind and the spirit, and everything lines up. That's why we want to figure out how to maintain this concept of self-realization.
And a couple of the things we shared with the audience were, your energy field extending beyond your aura, extending beyond your body. As you're, as you would say, dividing your attention in the space, you're actually able to engage the space in some of your sensory experiences or senses, because you have over 256 senses available to you to access. And so in this state of being, those senses start to sharpen, and depends on the individual, from my experience, as to which ones will start to sharpen sooner than others, because sometimes we have natural muscles that are already have been created or exercised before here, and so you kind of pick up a little bit of where you left off.
Where'd you leave off? What do you mean you pick up a
well,
little
again,
bit?
I'm always talking from the Buzz Lightyear perspective to infinity and beyond. So in some of the esoteric teachings, especially in a monastic life, the reason like they even trap monks from one lifetime to the next to identify them is so that they can continue their practices, they can continue their studies, and they meet them there to do that at further request from one to the next before they exit the last life into the next. Even if you don't have someone tracking you down and you didn't incarnate from being a monk to another monk or a lama to a lama, those teachings will cross your path again. What's really cool is people might know Uma Thurman's dad, Robert Thurman. He, when he intersected Tibet, he remembered how to speak in Tibetan in 6 weeks, fully fluent, because of his past efforts and he's a scholar that teaches at Columbia about, the lineage and all the aspects of the Tibetan culture and the studies, Buddhist studies. So it's just an of you beyond here, no matter what your belief system is, what your story is, whatever your energy is, creating these impressions that are very long lasting, which is super exciting, especially when you re-intersect them. You're like, oh, here I am again, and it blossoms rather quickly. So
What it blossoms rather quickly?
a teaching or a skill set that you might have
Which teaching and skill set are you
you can use an example of, say, your telepathy. We talked a little bit about telepathy. So if you were very adept at telepathy before here, this incarnation and then came into body, and then you're on the other side finally, like you intersect your spiritual practice in this lifetime, and that reactivates, or it might have always been with you but out of place because you didn't have anyone in your family or friends or anyone that could understand it. Clairvoyancy, again, another aspect.
Has anybody ever in your family understood it?
Understood telepathy?
Anything that you're talking about?
Yeah, actually.
Wow. There you go. Somebody in her family actually understood what the hell she just said.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Well,
That means they're adept at that, basically, if they understand what you said. So not many of us have adept family members. I can tell you one thing, I certainly do not. Not even close. So, but that's great that you do.
Well, I was blessed to have a special brother where we could share a lot of this. So, until the very end. So, the point is that when you get to the step, you have the ability to
Which step are you?
Self-realization.
Oh, you're referring. I don't recognize the self-realization aspect of what you're saying right now. Sounds like you talked about a whole lot of other things.
Okay, well, maybe we could define it for the audience, because we're speaking two different languages, which we typically do because we're both coming from different teachings or lineages sometimes, that our portals, our gateways, we have common like yogic and Tao disciplines. We both have, been raised in Christian faith, so we have common roads. But to talk about self-realization, even the self-realization temple that's down in Encinitas and up here in Santa Monica, there's, it's bringing many things into one space. But the aspect of self-realization is that you're realizing about self, and so some of these hidden jewels, these hidden gifts are in this process, that you get reacquainted with an aspect of yourself that, because maybe you're so distracted by karmic action and some of these other things not being present and not even being engaged with your gatekeeper, it's not until you're at this step that you start to really understand and put together the puzzle pieces and have these ahas within self. And it gets juicy because you start to engage.
Aren't you defining self-realization right now?
Am I defining self-realization?
Yeah, you said you needed to define self-realization.
Well, I said we can talk about it from the word self-realization. I think is pretty self-explanatory. I'm trying to explain what's available within that process of self-realization.
Oh, I thought you were going to define how your self-realization. You were going to define that.
Yes, I said. Are you with me, Thomas?
I'm trying. Maybe it's just all over my head. Let's hope not.
So when you're
otherwise, I have no business talking about
when
this.
you're in the process of self-realizations, your own ahas.
Well, the process of self-realization is not the definition of self-realization. So
right.
So define self-realization.
You realize self, your highest expression. When you're in self-realization is an aha. Like I am in a self-realization. When you're on the other side, okay. So, hello audience. Thomas. I can see him. He's getting his little Buddha with a stick and is about to whack me. Well,
it's not for, this is, well, in fairness to the audience, it's not for me. It's for,
right, and
it's
so
for them to.
So where we left off last time.
See, it's a very tricky subject matter. It's not important is to understand how to attain, and the exercises that you need to possibly give this a go. And to sit with that, but you have to define it for yourself, I guess, so that we can. So
when you're in the process of self-realizing,
that's a process of what is it? What is self-realization?
I don't know that you can give exact words to that, Thomas, because those are ahas. That's why I'm calling them ahas. You self-realize something, just like when you're subdivided in space, you're able to see self and see you. Like right now, I'm very connected to your inquisition and to my presentation, Okay, and so then I'm like, okay,
Inquisition.
I'm not
The Inquisition.
I'm not really reaching him,
the
and it feels
Inquisition.
like a little bit you have a bias on how you want this defined or a set parameters. But from my experience through a lot of different faiths, and that's why I brought up the self-realization temple. When you go in there, they're actually pointing to scriptures from all different types of faiths. It's not just one. And in the process of when you're on the other side, aligned with your ethics, and that was the other reason we wanted to connect with ethics in this process of self-realization, is you're starting to connect with the metaphysical aspects of self. And we all have innate gifts. We all have different aspects of ourself that we've already cultivated. So typically, when you're on this other side of this gate and things are getting really juicy and the ability to extend your energy and put forth efforts that will help you toward your mastery, you're going to have some deep realizations about your skills that have nothing to do with maybe that physical world that you're attached to. And those are tools that you can use in the physical world, but also in your...
Which tools are you referencing to?
The tools that you realize about yourself.
What tools are those?
They vary for everyone.
Oh,
Last week
you
talked about telepathy, clairvoyance.
Tools?
Those are tools. Those are tools that you can use. Extending your energetic field beyond into a space to share, amp up the space, to help elevate the space. There's lots of tools that you can do. There are some beautiful, you can levitate things, you can charge batteries up with the pure aspect of the mind leading that intention. In this space, when you start to really, it's beyond words,
Well, that's important. It's not beyond words, but I thought I can grab.
Experiences are beyond words. I would say, to try to articulate some metaphysical experiences in like, I saw his aura, or she charged my battery, or the rock levitated across the lake or up the mountain. That sounds like a fun story, but until you were to be a participant in that, would you not understand it? It becomes a story versus, I was a part of that. I saw that happen. I saw Thomas levitate the table and it moved across the room. That would be like, oh, wow.
You saw that? I didn't realize you saw that. I thought I was by myself when I was doing that. Sorry, I didn't mean to freak you out. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That was very sort of enlightening. But self-realization is a practice. It's an exercise. Like a bench press is a bench press. But self-realization for the mystic is the workout, is the base requirement in order to enter into that realm. And for us to understand and be able to discern that and understand what that tastes like, what that feels like, is really, really important. Self-realization is an action. It's something that somebody does. And so starting with divided attention, which we've been doing in order to become present, we've been doing in order to observe ourselves, we've been doing in order to educate our gatekeeper, but we haven't conscientiously been dividing our attention for a number of reasons, possibly. You have to develop a certain inner strength, a certain level of will, consciousness. You have to have the ability to take action. And we're at the take action phase of consciousness now. So when we can exercise self-realization when we want to, then we're in the take action mode of evolving, which then allows us the luxury of being able to transform negative emotions. And that's really a beautiful tool to have. And now we're not passively in the environment sort of being blown around like a feather in the wind. Now we have an initiative and we can direct our attention to the things that we would like to achieve, and while we go after those things, evolve in the process with the tool of self-realization, or in some teachings also referred to as self-remembering.
And I'd like, so that if I can interject, so self-remembering, that's right there in that portal is when you're remembering some of your innate gifts that are going to assist you towards your mastery. So, and towards that work would be the place to put what I'm trying to explain to you ineffectively.
Well, the literal interpretation of that is not really what the terminology means. It's an action, and it's an action that can only be taken in the elevated state of consciousness. And it's important to understand the difference between a concept and an action.
Well, all those things are active. You know, if all of a sudden you your telepathy, you're self-remembering that you're telepathic, your telepathy is an action you're taking on a daily basis. It doesn't turn off and on, and you're constantly exercising that muscle. Your clairvoyance, you're constantly exercising that muscle, and those tools in the self-realization tool, if there's subcategories, are what are assisting you in this process. So those, you become aware of them through this process of self-realization.
Well, that would be you identifying those skills that you have, but I can honestly say that I don't have them. But
well, it's different for everyone.
But I have the ability to.
Yeah.
I have the ability to remember myself, which is not a reflective concept. It's an action. It's an action that an adept will take in order to maintain his initiative, which is it's like lifting heavy weights. It's like, but it's blissful, and the longer you can maintain this particular action, the longer you realize that you can't ever be without it, and you don't ever want to be without it, because your capabilities of perception are diminished greatly when we step back into more of a reasoning, dualistic faculty. The exercise of self-realization allows us to jump a whole level into a different stratospheric ability to perceive the nuances of the moment. So we go from like numbing ourselves to what's actually happening into beginning this meditative process to sort of reconnect to what's actually happening. And then when we develop enough internal fortitude, we then have the ability to realize, oh my God, my entire existence up to this point has been wasted in this cyclical karmic existence, and I have a choice now to exit that realm. And that's where this tool becomes really, really, really important. We've overcome the buffers. We've overcome the fear of what is. We've challenged most of our demons, most of our karmic, cyclical mind F's in order to get here, because the mind does not want us here. Rational mind wants to remain in control, the dualistic mind, the reasoning mind. The slayer of that reasoning mind, or the disciplining of that reasoning mind, exists with this tool of self-realization, self-remembering. And so just to humble to the process, it's like it's a very, the mind does not want to let go, keep in mind. So when you enter into this realm, you're connecting with a different level of communication with yourself in relation to the world around you, and those two things talk to each other, the world around you and your innate wisdom. And we develop ears, and we develop a language that allows us to understand those nuances and those messages that can come to us through
clairvoyance or telepathy, sensory.
Well, I wouldn't know anything about that, but the strengthening of the muscle.
You just said it.
Oh, good. See that?
In your own words.
You guys are getting extra here. I mean, look at that. You're learning about clairvoyance and telepathy, but the act of self-remembering and staying on the other side allows you to realize your own gifts, and certainly a resensitizing to the environment and understanding and listening with a pair of ears that maybe you've never listened with, except for when you were born, and it's a great return. So, once you touch on these things, if you're really excited about a rediscovery of what you're capable of, this divided attention, being able to, let's do this together. Let's just make sure that we're present, make sure that we're here. And how we know that we're present is that there's a relaxation response that kicks in, and then there's a heightened level of awareness that kind of comes in. And once we have that particular condition, then we can begin to use suggestion to take our next step. So if you manage to get here, you can use suggestion like, okay, I'm going to put my attention over onto that red plaid jacket. And I'm going to wait for that just to naturally occur. I'm not going to force it. I'm just going to stay here in the present. I'm going to let my attention go to the red jacket. And as I'm there, and as I get present with that, without in the rational mind, like, what are you looking at a red jacket for? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? If that's happening, self-realization is not going to happen. But sit calmly with your attention, nuanced, over generally into the area that you suggested. And then just be in it. And then drop in a suggestion of bringing half of that attention back to you. Maybe observe body breathing and keep your attention over on the red jacket or whatever else you might be focusing on. Now, what's really nice about that, hear my voice drop a little bit, octave, voice drop a little bit, little octave drop, is that that's me dropping into the moment through the tool, using the tool of self-remembering, self-realization. What's nice about that is that there's no room for any static, there's no room for criticism or judgment. The moment at hand just begins to consume me, and I become more attuned to the sounds and to the nuances and the colors and the fact that the sun's dropping down and there's, light blue rays outside the door, and my breathing, I can hear my breathing because I have the headphones on really loud, and I just heard Suzanne just open her mouth in order to say something. So try it. Try to exercise that. And if you start getting if there's a lot of noise, that means you got to work on the meditative repose and longer, so that you can actually understand what it is to be. And once you understand what it is to be, use the suggestion of dividing your attention, trying to split your attention. And what you'll notice is all the garbage in your life will fall away, and the impressions that you receive in your immediate environment will be deeper. And that's beautiful. There you go. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Very good, Thomas.
Oh, and we were on a shot watching you the entire time that I blabbed.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? Perfect. Really, really good. See?
Yeah. So you were aware, but not quite aware, because you would have noticed the subtlety there. You would have noticed that you were.
No, it's not about an analytical understanding about technical abilities. It's about just that, really, losing yourself into something that you choose to lose yourself into, and in doing that, all the formatory BS of life falls away, and then all of a sudden you're just immersed in your process.
Right.
And that's there's a freedom in that. There's a liberty in that, and I have that moment with me forever, because it's those sorts of moments layer in really beautifully and encourage more of the same, and that's what's really beautiful about that particular tool of self-remembering and self-realization, as we're getting into.
Well. So, and you, in that moment of dividing your attention, you might notice. So, for Thomas, he did not notice or it didn't matter. The screen was on where it was going to be on. But at that same time, the environment will speak to you where you might need to be aware of something. So when you're very present in a moment, you start to get additional information that's not there or available because maybe your mind's busy, you're thinking, you're in that analytical process. But if you're just being, you literally get senses that will drop into the space that are there for you. So
senses that will drop into the space that are there for you. Explain.
Information that's in the space waiting for you to remember.
Like what information? Like how are you correlating information?
Well, there's really no like separation of space. So if we drop into the present moment, all things are available. So in the present moment, just in this space, all of a sudden additional information might be present here for both of us because it's being fed into the space. And if we don't slow down, we're not going to hear it, sense it, feel it, know to act on it. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, it could be as simple as like, I got to call Fred. And sure enough, probably Fred's thinking about you. And because you dropped in and are present in the moment and subdividing your attention even in a moment, you capture that.
Subdividing? What's a subdivision
you
of
said
attention?
Divide our attention.
Divide our attention, yes.
Yeah.
Well, here's the difference. Here's the qualitative difference between the two, is that one is a total immersion, and the other is a deflection or a reflection of other yourself. Exact, but in self-realization, there's no floating around. There's just the exercise.
But you noticed me speaking, about to speak. So if you really were just on the jacket and you wouldn't even have known that I opened my mouth. So
not true.
Well, so
not true.
me
because my senses become heightened.
Right.
So I'm going to be totally cognizant of any sound.
Exactly.
Well,
so if beyond, then you're feeling beyond you and the red jacket. So
it's not beyond. It's in the space. It's in the concurrent
There's lots
space.
of things in this space. There's Wi-Fi and millions of bits and particles running through this space right now. So it's possible in this practice that information that's valuable to you will remember about yourself.
It's not remembering. It's receiving a fresh impression that you've never received before. You
use the word self-remembering.
Yes, and that's the terminology used to define this action that I've been defining.
Right. So I'm just saying, for the listeners, you may pick up on some other things, just like you picked up on me, in the space. There's a lot of people out there that have a lot of skills. When they drop into the present moment, those skills are going to be, when you drop in, you really get clear. There may be nothing there for you to act upon or hear or feel.
That's very true, but that's not the act of self-remembering. So within the achievement of the dividing of the attention.
Okay, so
we're
going to be sitting here splitting hairs. Let's move beyond this.
No, splitting hairs is good because
it seems kind of silly. So I think for the audience, I think it's good. We'll leave it at your tool that you're giving them right now, because I think it'll get too confusing.
It's not confusing at all.
Well, because we're not completely in alignment with what we're sharing, so I don't want to confuse the listeners.
Maybe you have something to learn, possibly. Maybe you need to listen a little bit longer.
I don't think that's the case. I get what you're saying. So for the listeners, the tool that we just went through right now is just that. So practice that and see, what it...
Practice what? What are you suggesting that they practice?
Just the exercise you took us through. So practice that and see what it yields. I think we could leave it there at that. And then dive deeper into the process.
Oh, you want to... Oh, you're done? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think we should keep moving.
Well, go ahead. We'll lead on. I tell you what, if you guys got that in that little short synopsis, I'm effing brilliant. But
Well,
what happens is that, like I said, when I started, the magic of the specific type of effort, even though it's very simplistic, it's not that easy because of the foundation that needs to be laid in order to have the experience that I just simply had with my jacket. What's nice about it is it's a way to realize the potential of not only the moment at hand, but when you learn to realize that there's nothing really worth doing except for maintaining that state of mind, then the gifts start to present themselves, and then the mystical aspect of what is mystical in life starts to really show up. And it's nothing to be afraid of. If you're not prepared to have that experience, it means maybe possible you're taking a shortcut. But if you manage to get through the meditative repose and understand what the moment actually is, or what it is to be present, and you begin to understand that the self-observation mode, which should give you the tools that you need to sustain things you might not understand as you move into the mystical aspects of existence. And then as that gatekeeper gets more intelligent, it becomes more objective and a lot less superstitious and a lot less susceptible to the fear. It becomes impervious to fear, basically. And then in that, you become curious and want discovery and are enthralled with how much this life has in it and how much this moment has in it and how out of this world it can be. And a lot of people touch on that with drugs and have different types of experiences and different types of rituals that can snap us in there momentarily. But that's all it is a peek in a window. And if the mind is not prepared to see what it sees, it may misinterpret what it sees. But by going down a road of reaping and sowing and taking the time to understand and appreciate the present and all the healing that comes along with that, and then redefining this idea of yourself through taking photographs, and then having strength in that gatekeeper and making him into a tiger in terms of now I'm looking for something to challenge myself with. Now this tool of self-remembering becomes essential, absolutely essential. And then, see, I can only talk about the one side of the fence clearly, but the moment that you guys spend more time in the realm of self-remembering, then there's a whole nother world with a whole nother set of rules on the other side. There's a whole nother level of experience, and Suzanne was touching on some of that, which was these other types of powers of ESP and telepathy and clairvoyance and using your energy to influence the environments that you're in. And it's all very, very natural, nothing creepy or scary about it at all. It's just an extension of what your capabilities are that you earned. So you earn it. Trust when I say it's earned, and nobody gets to go past go and collect $200. Everybody has to take each step. There's no shortcut. Or what I just suggested is a shortcut. This is the shortcut.
I don't think there's shortcuts, Tom.
Well, knowing where to go or knowing what direction to pay attention in can be a shortcut when it comes to, like at a certain point, every teaching says you need a teacher, you need a guide, you need something to point you in a particular direction.
Well, even in meditative repose, people can get lost, just like they can if they're on a ceremony, plant medicine journey. They can get lost without a guide until they become adept, So even dropping in, into that void or gap with yourself is super powerful. And then to remember to come back and chop the wood and get the water.
Chop the wood and get the water.
Yeah, it's important. We still have to do those practical things in life. So with the so we're, Thomas has given us a great tool here for connecting with the moment, what's within the space, to drop in and divide your attention. And then from there, things will start to become more and more present for you. Or you'll become more and more aware of, I guess is a better terminology to use. And with that, that's a process, because sometimes when you start to access certain things within yourself, you may not have a full understanding of how they're to be utilized in this present moment in your life. And that's the accumulation of these efforts is super powerful, because they will come forward in different ways. I'm going to use it in each lifetime if you don't liberate after the first one. And so that's a powerful way to continue on serving and utilizing the efforts that you made in a past life in this moment. So it's super exciting, super juicy, and there's a responsibility with it. Yeah, there are a different set of rules. I was joking with a Catholic friend of mine, saying, they don't let sloths into heaven, so to speak. Like, the whole aspect of becoming virtuous is what helps feed you in this space, embodying those virtues.
Well, there you go. So where you were suggesting, from my perspective, this exploration of self-realization will be probably in the next 3 episodes, so that people on the planet can and gain some insight and some exercises. There's a whole bunch of wonderful exercises that can lead you into a particular type of a moment, a particular type of experience. But keep working on the meditation, keep taking photographs, keep trying to strengthen your understanding of the world around you by educating that gatekeeper. And then this tool of self-remembering starts to you become closer and closer to having this tool of perception in your human arsenal, so that you can get into your potential and step on through to the other side. And it's a blessing being able to even attempt to convey this type of information. There are lots of different nuances, and as Suzanne's demonstrating really clearly, is that there's lots of different ideas in terms of semantics, in terms of what things mean, based on how you've been educated. So it's a challenge to get everybody on the same page, but just keep the language simple. Try to understand what it is to be present. There's that airplane. Try to understand taking the photographs and self-observation. Try to identify the gatekeeper clearly, and in your meditative repose, start playing around with dividing your attention. When you get present, use suggestion to get from one place to another, to split your attention, and then see what fruit comes of that. And if one of you goes into that promised land and you wake up to it, you'll realize, oh my gosh, where have you been all my life? And you've been right. It's been right here. It's just that particular type of tool shows up when we need to be at our best. And so we don't want to wait for it to show up by accident. We want to evoke these opportunities and stay in them as long as possible. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Dang it.
So I think it's good to tell the listeners maybe where you're pulling some of those concepts from if they want to read about it.
No reading about this, just practicing. And it's
Okay.
they're not so much concepts as practices.
Right, but
and
so
anything I'm uttering has been a verification on my own terms.
right. So, and the nuances there, I think of there's many practices, from the Tao, from yogic practices from Buddhist practices, Zen, the way, well, Zen and Tao, that bring people into this state of being. So, based on what Thomas has shared, and the different aspects that I've interjected into his process, might be.
It's not my process. These are not mine for sure. I suggested the Sufis and the mystical aspect, the leg of their religion that they get into, that the mystics get into, but those particular skills show up in all practices.
Right. What I'm saying is they're taught differently, and so you might be hearing our language and be like, I understand what they're saying, or I understand what he's saying, or I understand what she's saying. And wherever that is, if you're inspired, exercise it. Try out, what Thomas has suggested. I have experienced many different practices, and there are many gateways to get to this place of self-realization and self-remembering. So nothing's more powerful.
You would have to define that and how you're using self-realization in order for that to land true.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, I think we're about out of time, Thomas. So I'm not going to, you're poking fun at me, which is rather interesting that you choose to do that on this side of the gate, which is a kind of an unaware move. Again, like when you're self-aware, and remember yourself, you're actually of service to the environment. You actually build upon one another. And there's not an ego or an attachment to a practice. I was listening to one of my great teachers, his name's Garshen Rinpoche, yesterday. He was tortured for 20 years in a Chinese prison when they invaded Tibet. He made a choice to go into that environment to be of service. He's the happiest man on earth. Very always encouraging of my practices and my work, my inner work. And so part of the self-remembering is remembering your highest expression, is remembering your place in that divine space. And I can attest from dropping in many different modalities that when you touch it and you know it. And then it's your choice if you want to keep exercising that effort to be there. And so it's really, again, it's syntax and semantics. But simply put, I would encourage you practice what Thomas has shared. If you can also simply practice it by being in a very simple meditative repose. Once you learn how to drop in to that meditative repose consistently without even having to turn the mind off, it's just you drop right in, you're going to be having a very similar experience without having to do anything other than just show up in your sit. And that doesn't have to be formal. It could be in a waking state, many different ways.
Well, interesting attempt to call me up, but understand that friction is also a critical element to jumping into higher states of consciousness. So friction, even in philosophical talk or debate or politics, can actually take us into higher realms of understanding. And yes, the ego can take us there and be part of the friction that's being created. But in the end, if we're transforming that and we're using that and having fun with it, of course, sense of humor goes a long way in this practice, especially when most of the time I'm laughing at myself for sure. But friction is a good thing. Evolving is not necessarily the most comfortable. As a matter of fact, it's not comfortable at all. It doesn't necessarily feel good all the time because you're facing down a lot of the things that have manifested in your life, and that's very, very courageous of you to do, but it's not comfortable. But it's in that uncomfortability that you want to exercise the meditative repose, the attempts to become present, the attempts to take photographs, and understanding that gatekeeper is going to get more educated, and that your frustration with yourself and your ability to either not be able to transform your negativity or understand that when you start to feel that is the opportunity to begin to do the work of self-realization. because that energy is available, the emotional energy is available. And if you manage to start playing around with that and get that experience of taking that energy up another notch, then you'll have more to contribute to whatever it is that's happening. And hopefully, you're a problem solver at the best, at the highest level. And that's what the self-realization and the self-remembering has in store for you. So it's worth the efforts. It's worth the years of efforts. You spend 4 years to go to school, go to college. You spend another 2 years to get a master's. If you just spend a couple of years trying to figure out what it is that I'm suggesting and do your research, it's all over. It's online everywhere. Just punch in self-realization, punch in self-remembering. Read the conscious beings that have walked the planet. You'll start to see these through lines, and you'll start to understand the origin of their thought. You'll understand Aristotle. You'll understand Galileo. You'll understand Isaac Newton. You'll start to understand the genius of their minds and where they were existing in order to come up with what they came up with. And that's Socrates. You'll really start to understand the origin of their wisdom, and you have that within you. So exercise this tool. Don't expect it to happen overnight. Some of you might be very close to evolving or having a breakthrough. Maybe some of you recognize the language, but it's the effort. It's figuring out how to make the right effort. And what's nice about what's being laid out is these are basic fundamental steps. And if you understand these fundamental steps and you start to study other religions, you'll start to see all of these fundamental steps hidden or obvious within them. So it's been a pleasure. Here we go.
So, are you cutting this off?
No. No, we want to round it out for sure.
Yeah. So, and with that being said, we've been going what I've been calling back to the basics, and the value of going back to the basics gives you a chance to reorient yourself. Maybe you have a certain practice that you do, and maybe it's become so habitual that it's not yielding to you what it had before. So going through these exercises and practices is really powerful. It's a way to explore and to try something a little different. You never know what's possible. And if you do have a pretty adept meditation practice that takes you to these places that Thomas has just described, that I've described in a different way, keep going there, and then maybe just do the checks and balances with your gatekeeper and your own observation of self to see where you're at in this moment.
Yeah, well, there you go. So this is Oneness Talk Radio. This is Thomas Ardavany and Suzanne Toro, and we've enjoyed attempting to convey one of the nuanced concepts of evolution, which is self-realization and self-remembering. Next week we'll expand on that, if I have anything to say about it, and we'll dive in that much deeper and give you some more things to do and try, and to wave a carrot in front of your face and encourage you to make right efforts and to keep making efforts to know yourself and to find your inner peace and to understand how that turns into service in the purest of forms. So, and how to take pure action. And that's one of our concepts as well, which is right along the lines of what we're introducing here. So we're going to send you out with what we came in with, and that's this beautiful little presentation. I think it's got its little music all wound in there, but enjoy, wave, goodbye.
Bye.
Let's see if it works. Let's see if it works.
It was silent, I could feel it calling to me. I had no choice, take me back.